we love the image of Mansa Musa. It's been so popularized in the West of Mansa Musa, the richest man to ever live. But when you actually speak to West Africans themselves, I've spoken, have conversations with people who have ties to traditional families of griots and stuff. They don't actually speak of Mansa Musa in the way that we do. Then again, we just have this view, but it's so misconstrued from the people within. They don't really, they speak about Sundiata in a very, very different way. If you actually speak to someone from this tradition, they will speak highly about Sundiata, yeah, but they don't have that much of an emphasis on Mansa Musa. And then in my story as well, Mansa Musa is living. The events take place when he's still alive or after his Hajj, and you see there's different viewpoints from different characters to show you that nuance of like, okay, we say that it's a Muslim estate or Muslim empire, but what even meant to be a Muslim, or you start seeing these differences and similarities, and it's a very interesting thing I think every good story is written in conflict, and that's one of the conflicts in the story as well. The idea of a spirituality. Then even within the Malians, that you have different degrees of Islamization, you then have the conflict they have against those that are completely animist, like the Mossi, who really and truly did not accept Islam until very, very, very late in their history. I'm talking in the 19th century, and then even their viewpoints, how they clashed. And we love the image of Mansa Musa. It's been so popularized in the West of Mansa Musa, the richest man to ever live. But when you actually speak to West Africans themselves, I've spoken, have conversations with people who have ties to traditional families of griots and stuff. They don't actually speak of Mansa Musa in the way that we do. There's that difference between us, that we see him in such a great way, and them. A lot of the traditionalists see him as someone that just wasted mad. They criticize his policies, to be honest. And you see there's that difference that's there between even what we see the Mali Empire as a Muslim society, as a Muslim state. There was that difference in this syncretization of religion with traditional beliefs. There was the traditionalists on one side that might still practice, they might just be completely animist, or they might practice a very mixed version of animism and Islam, and they might have closer ties to the traditional values and identity of Mandinka society prior to the Battle of Kirina, which is when the Mandinka Korofawa, the state, was actually formed. And then you have those who were closer to the urban areas, closer to the stakeholders that had a close connection with the wider world, across the Sahara, with Islam, etc., where that kind of like seek to navigate more towards more like a wider worldview. And there's this conflict as well. So even like, for example, just because I'm a Muslim, or just because I like to challenge the idea that Islam was it's not a foreign religion to Africa, or this false equivalent that people made with Islam and Christianity, I'm still honest and transparent in the fact that even within these societies, there was like kind of like a dichotomy as well. Like it wasn't like a universal homogeneous thing when it comes to spirituality and Islam. You see that, and I find that very interesting. I started thinking, okay, like so we just look from the outside in. We just have this view, but it's so misconstrued from the people within. They don't really, they speak about Sundiata in a very, very different way. If you actually speak to someone from this tradition, they will speak highly about Sundiata, yeah, but they don't have that much of an emphasis on Mansa Musa. And then in my story as well, Mansa Musa is living. The events take place when he's still alive or after his Hajj, and you see there's different viewpoints from different characters to show you that nuance of like, okay, we say that it's a Muslim estate or Muslim empire, but what even meant to be a Muslim, or you start seeing these differences and similarities, and it's a very interesting thing to it's a very, I think every good story is written in conflict, and that's one of the conflicts in the story as well. The idea of a spirituality. Then even within the Malians, that you have different degrees of Islamization. You then have the conflict they have against those that are completely animist, like the Mossi, who really and truly did not accept Islam until very, very, very late in their history. I'm talking in the 19th century, and then even their viewpoints, how they clashed, and it's a very fascinating topic, man. We could stay here talking about it for a very long time.
Yeah, I mean, I like that you mentioned there's a different perspective from the indigenous people of Mali concerning Mansa Musa, for example, because obviously from a Western perspective, a capitalistic world we live in today, the only virtue we recognize is wealth. So when we say Mansa Musa, the greatest, it's because of the wealth. They're not thinking beyond the wealth. It's just capitalism, isn't it? Just he had most money, he was the greatest. But tell us a bit, I like that point you mentioned. What perspective do the indigenous people of Mali have about Mansa Musa that may differ from the mainstream narrative we have across the Western and the rest of the world?
Basically, from the beginning of the creation of the Mali Empire, there was a polarizing conflict. On one side, you had, this is, how can I bring it all in? So the Mali Empire began, as a group of hunters or brotherhoods. There's a word called dozo, hunters or brotherhoods that almost became a de facto army, a de facto armed group that evolved into the first kings of the princes of the Mandinka. And then when Sumanguru took over what was left of the Ouagadougou Empire, the Ghana Empire, and then oppressed the Mandinka, they then banded together around Sundiata to then fight back Sumanguru and then establish their empire. These people, this tradition of the dozo, of this hunter brotherhoods, confradis and français, they were rooted in their animist beliefs, religious beliefs of animism. This tradition of the Griots will come from that tradition of creating this amulet for harnessing the power of the spirits and stuff for protection. And then as they adopted Islam, this is one of the greatest examples of the synchronization of religion. As they adopted Islam, instead of using these amulets from claiming to use the power of the spirits from the bush or whatever, then they started using the Quran, for example, in this amuletry, right, like versus the Quran, and trying to embody that force from Allah. In this case, was obviously some will say that it's not an Islamic practice, but then you can see that fusion of these two things. So from the beginning of the empire, you had on one side the traditionalists, we'll say, I like to call them traditionalists, who, for example, Mandinka, like many other groups in West Africa, had a matrilineal heritage. So they derived the inheritance and the lineage through their matrilineal line, and obviously that is opposes what is encouraged by Islam, which is patrilineal line. So you have there's these practices and this phenomena that they held on to, and they, from the beginning, they wrestled power with those who then had adopted Islam and wanted to have like an outgoing view or perspective of what they believe the empire should be. And I'll call them the globalists, the ones that were represented by the Bara, which was just a kind of like the parliament and the council that was established when Sundiata won the Battle of Kirina. He created this charter of rights, one of the first constitutions in human history, which is the Krokan Fuga. And part of it was the creation of this government, to create similarities, which is for us to have a shortcut for understanding. It's kind of like a parliamentary system, or like I'll say, with like representatives from all the different sections of society. So there was this challenge, this conflict between those traditionalists who wanted to just maintain the traditional way of ruling and identity and of the traditional Mandinka Highland society, and those who wanted to move from that into the new order that that Sundiata had established. And at the beginning of the Malian history, there was this competition between them to the point where there was quite an internal conflict between the nephews and sons of Sundiata that was supposed to take over and stuff, and a group trying to get the people that they kind of like sponsored to take over and so on, until there's a certain member who came from the sphere of the Gabara, which was, we say that he used to be a slave, which is Sakura. But even the word slave as well, this is another interesting thing. It doesn't really have the translation to English that we have today, because the word for slave is a complex thing to get into. But you could say that it could be someone that was a servant or slave, an actual slave, or someone that was just subservient to a ruler or to the Gabara as an institution. He took over, and he's the one that managed to stabilize the empire and make it grow further than anyone else had done so. And this dichotomy between the traditionalists and the globalists carried on through generations, and it's what you then see with the idea of Mansa Musa as well. Mansa Musa would have been seen as someone who cared more about crossing the Sahara and dealing with those foreigners, as opposed to staying at home and then fulfilling the rituals that you're supposed to fulfill as a Mandinka, the traditional stuff. And that obviously caused an issue. And to this day, we see that being caused today. To this day, you have in Africa as well, you have those that, for example, in your country, for example, in Senegal now, with the appointment of your president, now you have some people that criticize the fact that he seems to be appealing to foreign powers in his first visits outside of the country, in his first official visits, or even those that on the other side that are question his allegiance to them. I think
Moridia.
Yeah.
Yes.
So you will see that phenomena just being repeated. It's like a circuit thing. It's still there. There's still that difference between those that are there to the traditional stuff, the traditionalism, and the globalists that think that perhaps in our best interest is to look outwards. And that's why I think Mansa Musa wasn't looked at in the right way. To be honest, if you see, when he came back from his Hajj, a lot of his efforts went to establishing the improvement of Timbuktu, establishing universities, and a lot of this stuff. And it was all very, very much drawn towards his interest in the trans-Saharan trade. But then you had the people around the Sankarani River in southern, what we now call Guinea, the traditionalists in the Mandinka highlands that were like, you're doing all of that stuff up there in the north, but when have you been to your village to sacrifice the foal that you had to sacrifice, or to do this or to do that? And that's why. Whereas, for example, Sundiata did a better job at fulfilling both. Well, that's to the point that today people question whether he was actually Muslim or not, because he did a better job at maintaining that cohesion. And if it's interesting, because when you look at the Quran Fuga itself, it's this article, I think it's about 44 points or 44 articles. You see that they played a very important aspect of making sure that there was cohesion. They understood that there was a group of many different people. There's many different people coming together, this federation, and then many different groups of society. So that's why the Gabara was formed, where there was representative of blacksmiths, traders, all of the people that represented the main groups in society were all represented there, because they understood that they needed to keep that cohesion. That's why, for example, there's this practice as well of Sununkuya. I'm probably mispronouncing it, but this practice of, I think in English we call it cousinage, of this joking relationship between different groups. So it's a practice that is in West Africa.
The dozens. In America, they call it the dozens.
Yeah, the dozens in America. That's been inherited even across the Atlantic. But that practice was there, and it's so prevalent because Sundiata realized that You needed that to create cohesion in society, and that then goes back to completely debunk this idea that people that have oral traditions were somehow not sophisticated enough. They were able to realize that they needed that to elaborate a functional society with people with different backgrounds were able to all coexist and live together, and they did that for hundreds of years. So yeah, even just when you analyze it and you study it, you see that all of these things that Sundiata Keita and his people put together in the 13th century are even answers to today that we need for issues that we have today. And because we're so focused on Eurocentric ideas and thinking that all our solutions are outside of the continent, if we look into our history, that's one of the reasons why I wrote this book. If you look into our history, you see that a lot of the solutions that have already been there, we don't have to use systems of governance that are written by Europeans or Karl Marx or this or that. A lot of these ideas, they didn't even come up with them. These ideas of like what you would call socialism or very social approaches or
it takes a whole village to raise a child mentality.
But yeah, this is the Kurukan Fuga is one thing that I think every single person should read and they will understand. Even like, for example, feminism. You have this idea of feminism being a thing. I think feminism is just a necessity of the West, because we don't have that. We, prior to colonialism and came into contact with these people, we didn't have that issue. It didn't beg that solution. If you look at the Kurukan Fuga itself, this is a document this is a constitution that was written in the 13th century, early 13th century. You have one article that said that stipulated, this is law, that women should take part in every single aspect of society, from the ruling to everything. Women cannot be excluded from any part of society. When you have Sundiata putting that forward, you then realize that for women in 13th century Mali, there was not need for them to say they're feminist, so there was not need for that. And these issues that we have today is because we are adopting failing systems from the West that they're not even successful to them, let alone successful to us. So we need to kind of like go back and decolonize ourselves fully. Like we've got independence and stuff, but you have been well off before you were black or before you were Senegalese. I'm from Equatorial Guinea, which is a very small country in West Africa. It's the only country in West Africa that has Spanish that has Spanish as their official language. We're West Central Africa. We are the very epitome of that, of this failing systems from the West that we are adopting and we carrying forward as if we have to, but we don't. The country itself is a product of colonialism. What happens is that if you don't fully decolonize, if you don't understand that all of these systems and these identities that we're ruling ourselves by do not serve a purpose to us, essentially we're going from being colonized by the Westerners to being colonized by other Africans. And this is the same issue you find in Eastern Congo as well. You see the success of some Africans, and you see Pan-Africanists celebrating the success of Rwandans, for example, but it's coming at the expense of people in the Eastern Congo. So what Pan-Africanism is, that I do believe that we should all unite together. I do believe that that should include Haitians across the pond and Jamaicans, etc. But I think it shouldn't be a bloody Pan-Africanism at the expense of the blood of other Africans. I do feel that in the sense of decolonizing, we need to unite together, but we need to also find some sort of way of governing and a system of administration that acknowledges this ethnic differences that we have, because that's the only way we're going to be able to create functional states and are going to allow us to have that stability. You look at, for example, today in the Sahel, you see Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger alliance creating this federation. And it might sound like something innovative. A guy that probably has studied somewhere in the West will even tell you how this comes from his roots and communism, the alliance to Russia, this and that. But these people are just reverting back to what their ancestors were doing 700-800 years ago. they're the inheritors of the Manden Kurofawa, and the Shunga Empire is the same people, the same system, the same way of looking at their identity and stuff. They're realizing they have that common identity. And yeah, like I said earlier, the Mali Empire and Manden Kurofawa is actually a federation, and that's what they're doing. And that's how they're managing to be able to fully decolonize themselves to be able to lead their own destiny. I feel like for the sake of Pan-Africanism, we need to do that and fully decolonize. I think that what I've described to you about Equatorial Guinea happens also right next to us in Cameroon, in the area that wishes to be recognized as Ambazonia. It's happened as well in Biafra, and it happens everywhere, to be honest, in Africa.
So it's almost a reconfiguration, going back to the original settings. Yeah, we're going back to the original settings, factory settings, and it's not necessarily based on the colonial lines that were imposed upon the region, but more so about the tradition that defined the region in the first place, the customs, the history, the ancestral line, to go back to that. And I think, as you've eloquently put here, that is how it was to begin with. So the only way to decolonize is to go back to how things were in the beginning, which is a wider perspective. It's more indigenous to the people, to their traditions, and it's more respectful to the history of that region. It's been amazing. I want you to tell the audience where to buy your book from. Give us a bit of an insight as to what the book covers. Give us as much information as you can for those who want to pursue this learning and to actually get in touch with you personally.
So the book is available on Amazon. You can just type Griots Tell No Lies and it will come up. I'm on social media as well. My Instagram and my Twitter is Griots Heavens Earth. You will find a lot of information there as well. What the book is about is literally a historical epic. I've had people describe it as an African Odyssey, which is focused on this conflict there is between one of the Mossi kingdoms in what's currently Burkina Faso and the Mali Empire. We know in history that the Mossi, a very group of interesting people, because one of the things that made them notable was the fact that their army was based on cavalry. They were horsemen, and that's another thing that if you learn your history from Eurocentric perspective, you will never even picture Africans riding horses with sophisticated armies of cavalry, waging war, etc. And one of the most important footnotes of history is the fact that they managed to go they're significantly smaller than the largest state, the dominant state at the time, which is the Mali Empire, and they went as far as to raid Timbuktu, which is the most important city in West Africa at the time. They went far into the Mandinka land and they raided it. And the story revolves around that. How did that happen? It's fiction. A lot of the characters are fictional, but a lot of the events, places, and characters as well are real characters in history, like Mansa Musa, Sagmangia, etc., etc. And it's a good way for you to be able to get a good idea of, okay, what's African history like truly. You submerge yourself into through the eyes of another African from the Mossi kingdom. The main character, Rogo, is a leader of one of the regions in the Mossi kingdom, and it's a story of conflict. You learn through exploring different conflicts between identity, religion, and all of these things that we have misconceptions about today. That if we actually have a attentive look at history, we'll be able to find very clear answers. But yeah, I think it's a compelling story. I focused myself on making sure there was an entertaining story, but at the same time, you will be able to learn. I think it's a good exercise to read it and maybe reread it, and then doing some searching. My main thing is to make sure that people just Google stuff. Actually, read, don't take it from me. I might be lying. Google it. And then you'll go into like a rabbit hole of information and you'll be fascinated. So it will just like a spark to ignite people's search for true African history. And it's just the first book in a planned trilogy. So hopefully with enough support, I'll be able to write the next one. And And yeah, Griots Tell No Lights on Amazon worldwide, and at Griots Heavens and Earth. Not at Griots Heavens Earth. And yeah, Jazakallah khairan for this opportunity to come over here. It's been a pleasure. May Allah facilitate you and give you opportunities the same way that you've given me an opportunity, inshallah.
Barakallahu feekum for coming and for sharing the rich history and perspective that you've given our audience. It's an amazing book, and I'll recommend that those who are interested in this topic, who even had a bit of interest in terms of some of the questions raised today, go onto Amazon. The link will be provided in the description box, and support the work so that we can get the second and the third installment, inshallah. And you're always welcome on this platform, brother. So I think we would learn a lot more from you if we had more opportunities in the future to host you and to help clarify and to also dispel many of the myths and the lies that are attributed to African history. Jazakallah khair, inshallah, and we'll see you in another installment.